فدخلت تحت الكساء، فلما اكتملنا جميعا تحت الكساء أخذ أبي رسول الله بطرف الكساء وأومي بيدي اليمنى إلى السماء وقال: اللهم إن هؤلاء أهل بيتي وخاصتي وحامتي، لحمهم لحمي ودمهم دمي، يؤلمني ما يؤلمهم ويحزنني ما يحزنهم، أنا حرب لمن حاربهم وسلم لمن سالمهم وعدو لمن عاداهم ومحب لمن أحبهم، إنهم مني وأنا منهم، فاجعل صلواتك وبركاتك ورحمة وغفرانك ورضوانك علي وعليهم، واذهب عنهم الرجس وطهرهم تطهيرا. فقال الله عز وجل: يا ملائكتي ويا سكان سماواتي، إني ما خلقت سماء مبنية ولا أرضا مدحية ولا قمرا منيرا ولا شمسا مضية ولا فلقا يدور ولا بحرا يجري ولا فلكا يسري، إلا في محبة هؤلاء الخمسة الذين هم تحت الكساء. فقال الأمين جبرائيل: يا ربي ومن تحت الكساء؟ فقال عز وجل: هم أهل بيت النبوة ومعدن الرسالة، هم فاطمة وأبوها وبعلها وبنوها. فقال جبرائيل: يا ربي أتأذن لي أن أهبط إلى الأرض لأكون معهم سادسا؟ فقال الله: نعم قد أذنت لك. فحبت الأمين جبرائيل وقال: السلام عليك يا رسول الله، العلي الأعلى يقرئك السلام ويخصك بالتحية والإكرام ويقول لك: وعزتي وجلالي إني ما خلقت سماء مبنية ولا أرضا مضحية ولا قمرا منيرا ولا شمسا مضية ولا فلقا يدور ولا بحرا يجري ولا فلكا يسري، إلا لأجلكم ومحبتكم، وقد أذن لي أن أدخل معكم، فهل تأذن لي يا رسول الله؟ فقال رسول الله عليك السلام: يا أمين وحي الله، إنه نعم قد أذنت لك. فدخل جبرائيل معنا تحت الكساء، فقال لأبي: إن الله قد أوحى إليكم يقول: إنما يريد الله ليذهب عنكم الرجس أهل البيت ويطهركم تطهيرا. فقال علي لأبي: يا رسول الله، أخبرني ما لجلوسنا هذا تحت الكساء من الفضل عند الله. فقال النبي: والذي بعثني بالحق نبيا واصطفاني بالرسالة نجيا، ما ذكر خبرنا هذا في محفل من محافل أهل الأرض، وفيه جمع من شيعتنا ومحبينا، إلا ونزلت عليهم الرحمة وحفت بهم الملائكة واستغفرت لهم إلى أن يتفرقوا. فقال علي: إذا والله فزنا وفاز شيعتنا ورب الكعبة. فقال النبي ثانيا: يا علي، والذي بعثني بالحق نبيا واصطفاني بالرسالة نجيا، ما ذكر خبرنا هذا في محفل من محافل أهل الأرض، وفيه جمع من شيعتنا ومحبينا، وفيهم محموم إلا وفرج الله همه، ولا مغموم إلا وكشف الله غمه، ولا طالب حاجة إلا وقضى الله حاجته. فقال علي: إذا والله فزنا وسعدنا، وكذلك شيعتنا فازوا وسعدوا في الدنيا والآخرة ورب الكعبة.
أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. سبحان الله والحمد لله ولا إله إلا الله والله أكبر ولله الحمد. الله أكبر، الله أكبر، الله أكبر، الله أكبر. أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله، أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله، أشهد أن محمدًا رسول الله، أشهد أن محمدًا رسول الله، أشهد أن أمير المؤمنين وإمام المتقين عليا ولي الله، أشهد أن أمير المؤمنين وإمام المتقين عليا حجة الله. هيا على الصلاح، هيا على الصلاح، هيا على الفلاح، هيا على الفلاح، هيا على خير العمل، هيا على خير العمل. الله أكبر، الله أكبر. لا إله إلا الله، لا إله إلا الله. إن الله وملائكته يصلون على النبي يا أيها الذين آمنوا صلوا عليه وسلموا تسليما. Thank you.
أعوذ بالله من الشيطان اللعين الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الله أكبر، الله أكبر. أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله، أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله، أشهد أن محمد رسول الله، أشهد أن محمد رسول الله.
اللہ 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 اے رب پنجتن اے رب پنجتن اے رب پنجتن میری تجھ سے ہے یہ دعا اے رب پنجتن اے رب پنجتن اے رب پنجتن میری تجھ سے ہے یہ دعا پروردگار تو ہی رحیم و کریم ہے قرآن کہہ رہا ہے علی العظیم ہے آواز کن سے پہلے اتنا قدیم ہے اے رب پنجتن اے رب پنجتن واجب ہے کائنات میں ہر دم تیری ثنا اے رب پنجتن اے رب پنجتن اے رب پنجتن میری تجھ سے ہے یہ دعا چاہا جو تو نے خلق میں پہچان ہو تیری تو نے بنائی 5 ستاروں کی ایک لڑی ان کی رضا میں تیری رضا ہے چھپی ہوئی اے رب پنجتن اے رب پنجتن ناراض ہم سے ہو نہ کبھی آل مصطفیٰ اے رب پنجتن اے رب پنجتن اے رب پنجتن میری تجھ سے ہے یہ دعا تنہائیوں کا تیری راہ ہے جو ہم سفر وہ مصطفیٰ جو بات تیرے سب سے معتبر ہے قرض جس کا اجر رسالت جہان پر اے رب پنجتن اے رب پنجتن ہر قرض کر دے غیب سے مقروض کا ادا اے رب پنجتن اے رب پنجتن اے رب پنجتن میری تجھ سے ہے یہ دعا تجھ سالی بھی کہتا ہے خالق جسے علی انگلی پکڑ کے جس کی شریعت تیری چلی رازق ہے 2 جہان کا ولیوں کا ہے ولی اے رب پنجتن اے رب پنجتن صدقے میں اس کے رزق میں ہو وسعتیں عطا اے رب پنجتن اے رب پنجتن اے رب پنجتن میری تجھ سے ہے یہ دعا وہ فاطمہ حجاب بھی نوری ملا جسے حسنین جیسے جس نے پسر پال کر دیے رحمت بنی جو عالم رحمت کے واسطے اے رب پنجتن اے رب پنجتن ٹوٹے نہ مومنین سے رحمت کا سلسلہ اے رب پنجتن اے رب پنجتن اے رب پنجتن میری تجھ سے ہے یہ دعا وہ مصطفیٰ کا لال جو دین کو بچا گیا تیغوں کو اپنے زور قلم سے ہرا گیا امن و اما کا درس جہاں کو پڑھا گیا اے رب پنجتن اے رب پنجتن ہر سمت اس کے صدقے میں ہو امن کی فضا اے رب پنجتن اے رب پنجتن اے رب پنجتن میری تجھ سے ہے یہ دعا معبود وہ حسین جو محبوب ہے تیرا سر کاٹ کر بھی جس کا نہ ظالم جھکا سکا جس نے زمین کو عرش معلیٰ بنا دیا اے رب پنجتن اے رب پنجتن دکھلا دے ہم فقیروں کو روضہ حسین کا اے رب پنجتن اے رب پنجتن ऐ रब पंजतन मेरी तुझसे है ये दुआ, मुश्किल को टाल हल मसाइब को भेज दे, हैं जिसके मुंतज़िर उसी साहिब को भेज दे, मुश्किल कुशा के आखिरी नाइब को भेज दे, ऐ रब पंजतन, ऐ रब पंजतन, है सिब्त जाफर और हसन की ये इल्तिजा, ऐ रब पंजतन, ऐ रब पंजतन, ऐ रब पंजतन मेरी तुझसे है ये दुआ। पर मोहम्मद वाले मोहम्मद सल्लल्लाहु।
Bismillahir-Rahmanir-Rahim. Sayyid Hasan, Rizvi, respected elders, brothers, sisters in Iman, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. On the joyous occasion of Eid-e-Mubahela, on behalf of the Board of Trustees and the Managing Committee, we wish you all Kushali Mubarak. Surah Fatiha is requested for all the names listed on the screen, and Kul Arwahil Mu'mineen wal Mu'minat, Sawab al-Fatiha. Ayatim Yajibun is requested for all the names listed on the screen and whoever is in need of it here and elsewhere. Let us all recite it together. Bismillahir-Rahmanir-Rahim. Amma yujibul muztarra idha da'ah wa yakshifu as-su'. Amma yujibul muztarra idha da'ah wa yakshifu as-su'. أَمَّنْ يُجِيبُ الْمُضْطَرَّ إِذَا دَعَاهُ وَيَكْشِفُ السُّوءَ أَمَّنْ يُجِيبُ الْمُضْطَرَّ إِذَا دَعَاهُ وَيَكْشِفُ السُّوءَ أَمَّنْ يُجِيبُ الْمُضْطَرَّ إِذَا دَعَاهُ وَيَكْشِفُ السُّوءَ. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad. Now let us invite Sayyid to come forward to recite tonight's madlis for Muhammadin wa ala Muhammad salawat.
رحم الله من قرأ الفاتحة بعد الصلوات. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. بسم الله. أعوذ بالله السميع العليم من الشيطان اللعين الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم وبه نستعين. لا حول ولا قوة إلا بالله العلي العظيم. والحمد لله رب العالمين، والصلاة والسلام على أشرف الأنبياء والمرسلين، خاتم النبيين، شفيع المذنبين، رحمة للعالمين، سيدنا والنبينا وحبيب قلوبنا والشفيع نفوسنا والطبيب ذنوبنا، أبي القاسم المصطفى محمد. اللهم صل على ثم الصلاة والسلام والتحية والإكرام على أهل بيته الطيبين الطاهرين المعصومين المظلومين، لا سيما بقية الله في الأرضين روحي وأرواح العالمين لترابي مقدمه الفداء الذين أذهب الله عنهم رجسا وطهرهم تطهيرا اللهم صل على محمد وعلى محمد وعجل ولعنة الله على أعدائهم أجمعين من الأولين والآخرين إلى قيام يوم الدين أما بعد صلوات على محمد وآل محمد مؤمنين مؤمنات brothers and sisters in Islam and Iman Salamun alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Eid Mubarak to all of you. So, we've done this a few times, so inshallah we're going to try it again today and tonight. We'll have the quiz and lecture merged together. So you can start logging on right now, inshallah, as we go through the introduction. And then when ready, then I'll prompt you for the first question. We have various Eids in Islam. There are some that are common between all Muslims, and then there are some that are specific to the followers of the Ahlul Bayt alayhimus salam. The two that are common between all Muslims are, of course, Eid al-Adha and Eid al-Fitr. And when we say that they're common between us and the Ahlul Sunnah, what we mean is that there's really no disagreements about what happened, what took place, what's the tafsir and interpretation. And generally, in terms of the hikmah, basira, the wisdom, the reason, there really isn't any arguments there. Eid al-Adha is there to sort of celebrate the end of the Hajj rituals in the Hajj season. So we have, we celebrate Eid al-Adha here, right? We have the salah, and then we have food. But if you're not actually there for Hajj, it doesn't really have the same feeling, right? I mean, we have the sessions over here, and people do get dressed up, and maybe you go and see your family. But I mean, even when we celebrated Eid al-Adha here after the Salah, most people that I know, they went back to work, right? So it wasn't like a real Eid. Eid al-Fitr, on the other hand, when we're commemorating the end of the Ramadan month, everybody's taking off, right? And there, because we've actively participated in it, it feels more like a real Eid, right? And that's why, after 29, 30 days of spiritual cleansing and, moving away from the dunya, we spend that wonderful Eid al-Fitr making sure we reconnect to the dunya as much as possible by eating as much as possible, right? So, we go out of our way and we celebrate. So these two things are not really, we're not arguing with anybody. Sunni, Shia, doesn't matter. Eid al-Adha, we're celebrating or recognizing the end of Hajj, a specific type of action in ibadah in Islam. Eid al-Fitr, we're celebrating the end of Siyam and Sawm and Roza and the Ramadan season. So these are the two ones we don't really have any issues with or disagreements with the other side. The other two Eids, we say, okay, there we've got some disagreements here. And that's, of course, Eid al-Ghadir and then Eid al-Mubahela. And over there's a disagreement not in the actual event itself. It's not as though they deny the event of Ghadir. Or they say Waqa'atul Ghadir or Hadithul Ghadir. They know that something happened there. And the same thing with Mubahala. They know that something took place. It's undeniable. An ayat of Quran was revealed for it too. There's no disagreement there. But there's only one group of Muslims that celebrates both of these events. It's only us as followers of the Ahlul Bayt, as Shi'atu Ali, we're the only ones that actually celebrate this event, both of these events. Now, why that's the case, of course, I think it's very obvious. It's because our understanding of these events is much, much different. For Eid al-Adha and Eid al-Fitr, what we're doing is we're celebrating, there was something great, but it's just celebrating the end of a certain type of ibadah, right? The completion of Hajj and the completion of Ramadan, of fasting. With Eid al-Ghadir and Eid al-Mubahala, what we are completing and what we are celebrating is something completely different. This is something that is not just simply some fiqhi thing or legal thing. This is something that's theological. It's philosophical. It's mystical. There's a deeper sort of representation here. And of course, for Eid al-Ghadir, as we talked about last time, in the ahadith, this is known as Eid al-Akbar. This is the greatest Eid. So it's very sad that we're the only ones celebrating it. But we've talked about before why we'd be the only one celebrating it, unfortunately, because others haven't recognized that when you want to complete and celebrate the completion of haqq and deen itself, this is why we celebrate Eid al-Ghadir. But what are we actually celebrating for this Eid over tonight, inshallah? Let's go to our first question after a salawat ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad. So, assalamu alaikum to everybody, to as myself, of course, again, the Dujis and the Duji Ghulam Husseins, I guess the Dragon Master, Luca, Eid Mubarak with a heart, Baki, it's Eid day. Technically it's Eid night, but Yusuf Ali, Eid Mubarak, Elephant, there's some weird names tonight, ZM, Sakina. Okay, so we have one Mubahela and we have one Mubahala. That's very interesting. Hadi Manekia, Specialist. I don't know what this one is. Okay, and Plato, as usual. Sahar. Okay, let's jump right into it, inshallah. The reason I said that those two names, Mubahela and Mubahala, are interesting is because it's related to our first question. If it ever loads up. There we go. Which of the following spellings are correct? Mubahila or Mubahala? Or both are correct. So for the first two, it depends on whether the ha gets a kasra or a fatha. Or they could both be correct. So which is it? Anybody who's been paying attention to any of these events and any of these quizzes for the past year and a half, I think you should understand what the answer probably is. It should be obvious. 53% of you got it right, mashallah. So normally we say it or pronounce it as Mubahila, but that's actually not correct Arabic. It's Mubahala. It's coming from Bab al-Mufa'ala, right? So that would be the correct one. Asant. Okay. So what exactly are we celebrating and commemorating today then? I think generally we all know something. We know some parts of the story. But do we know the actual full story? A lot of times, for some reason, there seems to be little details left out. And some of those details are actually pretty significant. And they're helpful in us getting lessons from Eid al-Mubahela. And, one of our ulama, he says that, we obviously as Shi'as, we recognize the fadila and the azamat of Eid al-Ghadir, obviously. But he says sometimes people kind of just lessen the value of Eid al-Mubahela. And he said that this is not correct, this is not appropriate. Number one, because there is no disagreement between Sunnis and Shias. The event is clear, there is no disagreement. Those who participated, meaning those who were present, there is no disagreement. The ayat that are related to it, generally speaking, there's no disagreement. But what we take away from it, there's a difference. And some of the lessons that we can learn also there, maybe we as followers of Ahlul Bayt may be able to take a few extra points that maybe we haven't done before. Let's go to the second question now. Inshallah, if you can recite a salawat ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad. The event of Mubahala took place during which period of Rasulullah's life, sallallahu alayhi wa sallam? The beginning, meaning the Meccan period when they were there. The middle, meaning right after Hijrah. Or the end when he was close to his death. We hear all these different events, all these battles and all these things that took place in Islamic history. Sometimes we're not able to place it in sort of like the timeline of the life of the Prophet, right? And most of the time, I'll tell you, I'm not big into history, so it doesn't really matter. Was it this year or this year? Mubahala does matter. It's actually very important, and inshallah we'll mention why. It's very important that we know exactly when it took place. And I could have asked what year it took place, but I don't think that's even helpful as well, because even if you mention whatever, this year in Hijrah, but we are sometimes not able to remember which part of the life of Rasulullah was that in this time of Hijrah, right? So I think asking beginning, middle, end might be a bit clearer for us. So there's a disagreement here amongst you, but the majority of you did get it right. it was at the end when he was very close to his death. They say it was approximately the year 9 after Hijrah or 10, something like that. Very close to the Shahada and Wafat of Rasulullah. Because they say most likely around 10 or 11 Hijris when he passed away. And around somewhere between 8 and 10 Hijri is when Mubahala took place. So this is the last few years of his life. Now, how does that matter? Why does it matter? Well, let's paint the picture about what's going on. So Rasulullah now, he's in charge, right? The Islamic sort of state has been developed. And now they've entered the next phase, which is that they are sending out letters to all the nearby areas, inviting them towards Islam. Right? So Rasulullah is taking these letters, giving them to ambassadors, and now they're going out and sending it to these various areas. What's interesting here that I want to highlight is this idea about this invitation that Rasulullah is giving to Islam. This is a topic that comes up a lot, right? When we talk about da'wah or interfaith dialogue or intrafaith dialogue, all of this stuff. A lot of times, the default idea that you and I have in our mind is that, yeah, we should go and spread Islam, or specifically Shia Islam, to everybody, right? It's our duty, it's our wajib duty. And sometimes I hear specifically Shias complaining that, well, Sunnis go and do all this da'wah stuff, what about us? Why aren't we going out to the prisons, and why aren't we going out to churches, and why aren't we going out to other synagogues or Jedi temples, I don't know, whatever the place. You're going there, why aren't we preaching this stuff? Where's our da'wah? Why aren't we going out and doing tabligh in that sense? Well, maybe perhaps we should, if we're calling ourselves followers of the Ahlul Bayt, it might be wise for us to actually see what is their example. When were they going around and spreading Islam to everybody else? If you want to, again, take a very, let's say, a superficial look. Superficial in the sense that I don't want to go deep into it right now, but just give you some points to think about. The beginning of the mission is what? Right at the beginning, as everybody should know, it's da'wah dhul ashira. The Prophet is commanded right away to invite who? His family. And we know the emphasis in Islam always is start with yourself, of course, and your family. From there, the movement begins, and it's just sort of extended family or local community. That's it. After years and years and years of doing all this and working on just pretty much Makkah and Medina and just the surrounding areas, now, after Rasulullah has succeeded, Islam has basically taken hold, right? The fath has been completed, victories there. Now, towards the end, right at the end of Rasulullah's life, now he says, okay, let's write some letters and send it out to other people and start doing this da'wah and inviting people, or what we would call interfaith dialogue. It's at the end of his life. So a question for us to think about is, what should we really be thinking about first as a primary thing? Should we be working out, going and spreading it out to everybody else? Or should we be looking inwardly first and saying, okay, do we have our own house in order? Have we really understood our own principles of our faith before going out and spreading it to everybody else? I mean, think about it rationally. Before you have guests over your own house, don't you clean up? Don't you want to make sure your house is clean before you invite anybody over? Can we really say that our own community and house is in order before we start inviting, random individuals? Here's Islam, and this is what Islam's all about. It says this about, all people are equal, and this is what we say about marriage. This is what we say about, the economic system in Islam. Well, are we ready to actually provide all of those things? No, you can be the judge, and I think most of you, if you're introspective enough, you would know the answer. So perhaps maybe we should rethink this model of spreading constantly and going out and outreach and all this stuff, and think, well, maybe we should spend a little bit more effort on our own first. Salawat ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad. Now, all these ambassadors are going out with the letters from Rasulullah, inviting people towards Islam. And of course, one of these areas is Najran. Now, where is Najran? Who are these people who are being invited? Well, this brings us to our third question. Well, we have 4 questions, but our third question will be our third topic-related one. Najran is a city in Hijaz that is near the border of what? Or where? Iraq, Iran, Yemen, or Sanford? Sometimes geographic data matters, right? sometimes, I was speaking with somebody else about Mubahala, and they were thinking Najran was like some far off land. They're like, yeah, Islam never even touched it. Like it was in Hijjaz. It was in, again, I don't like to use the word Saudi because it doesn't belong to them. It was in Hijjaz. This is Arabia, right? But it was near one of these borders, and that also, matters as well. So let's see. Okay, so 70% of you probably Googled it, I think. That's my guess. Because it took a while. I don't know why that was taking so long, but yeah. So it's near the border of Yemen, basically. But it's within Hijaz. That's where the city of Najran is. And as many of you know, it was pretty much still a Christian stronghold. And according to historians, one of the last Christian strongholds that existed at that time. Because at that point, there were some areas that still had Christians and Jews, but most of the area had been, they had converted to Islam, or they had at least majority Muslims. This area was one of the last remaining areas that had a huge, strong Christian presence. And it wasn't a simple Christian presence. Many of the most elite Christian scholars or priests were in this area. There's actually a whole history to Najran, and yeah, we don't have enough time, but there's actually a very, very interesting history about what happened, and there's a specific individual, I think his name was like Fimian or something like that, who was basically the one who established the city after traveling from place to place. This was somebody who was almost you could call him a Christian arif, right? A mystic, somebody very, very involved and deep into their ibadah. So much so that they say about this person, he was a constant traveler. He would go from city to city and perform ibadah, right? Just try to be on his own. But people would see him and get attracted to his ibadah. And whenever people would come and see, oh, look at this person, Fimian or Fimiyun, something like that. Whenever they would see how great his ibadah was, they would start to, gather around him and start to talk about him, and he'd become well known in the city. Now, most of us, what we would do is, if ever we became that ma'ruf or mashhur, we would stick around. We'd probably create an Instagram page for ourselves, or social media account, maybe a Patreon account, and start monetizing everything. That's what we would do, right? To bank off of that. But this person, being somebody who is a true Abdullah, a slave of Allah, every time there was too much attention on him, too many people found out about him and his secret ibadah, he would get up in the middle of the night and leave and go somewhere else because he didn't want any of that attention on him. So he ended up constantly moving from place to place because he would try to find a secluded area to do ibadah, but just people would see the nurani nature, the illuminated nature of his ibadah, and they'd find him, and he would get up and leave again. Until he ended up in this area of Najran. Again, there's a whole history to this, which, I'll leave for another time. I mean, another time probably will be next year for next Mubahala maybe. But it's a very interesting sort of history. And when he ended up in Najran, the Arabs who were living there over that time were not originally Christians. They were just like every other Arab, where they were worshiping idols. The famous type where they were, worshiping these date trees or dates and idols, we were putting dates in front of it, stuff like this. So when he came there, some of these individuals, when they saw what he was doing, they said, what is this ibadah you're doing? Like, we are worshiping, what we worship, meaning our idols. When we see you worship, we see this light around you that we've never seen before. What is it that you do that we're not doing? And then he said, I obey the one single God, Allah, whereas you are worshiping the makhluqat, you're worshiping things. And because of this is why your ibadah does not have this nurani value. And I'm paraphrasing the whole history here, and I'm summarizing it. And because of this, people got very attracted. They said, okay, what should we do? He said very clear, leave your religion, come to the true religion of, Christianity basically, but Tawheed, right? Because he was trying to practice this idea of monotheism. And because of that, almost the whole city, pretty much the majority of the city, switched over to what became Christianity at that point, right? And they all switched because of this person's ibadah. So again, there's a lot more details to the story that are actually really interesting, but maybe for another time, inshallah. Recite salawat ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad. There was a point that I wanted to mention, and you know what, let me do it. Why not? So even though this person who established the Christian sort of majority in Najran, right, many ages ago, before the time of Rasulullah, we might say, oh man, he made Christianity there. Oh, that's terrible, right? If only he had set up the proper deen. But sometimes, we don't have to be so idealistic. The fact that he was able to take people away from shirk, in the very literal sense, right, being idol worshippers, one step closer to worshiping Allah is actually a big deal, right? That was a big thing that he had done. And this was a person who was, a very humble individual. And, sometimes, especially, I think, I hear this a lot from youth, and I was like this myself when I was younger. Thinking about, people always have this argument and this problem of religion and culture and stuff getting mixed up. And, the way our centers are now, they're so cultural, and I wish we could just separate all this stuff. No, that deserves a deeper conversation. But at the very least, we need to understand the fact that we have these centers available, these imam bargas, right, to be able to perform azadari. That's not a small thing. And it took me a while to really recognize that. Right? In my early phase, I was very rebellious. I was like, my parents, they didn't teach me the right stuff. And, we got all these, like Hindu rituals and stuff mixed in. This is terrible. We can't have that. And I was really, really harsh on this stuff. But then, I wised up a little bit, right? Not fully, but I wised up a little bit. I calmed down. I said, you know what? If they didn't come and establish just these basic rituals, just the basic form of azadari, maybe they didn't teach us the real meaning of hijab and salah and saum and how to do tarbiyah. Okay, maybe they missed out on all that stuff. And I think they're excused because they probably didn't learn that stuff from where they came from. Just that base level of deen, or at least connecting to the Ahlul Bayt, look at what it's been able to set up for us right now. So sometimes we don't have to think about everything need to be perfect right away. We have a simple base that we can work with. And then, for people who are interested, not simply in just complaining about everything, but actually interested in, moving forward and progressing and growing, we'll say, okay, look, we've got a great base. Alhamdulillah, those who have emigrated over here have left us something really strong, a good foundation. Now we can work together and figure out how we can improve upon that. And that seems to be exactly what we learn from this story as well, is that yes, this person did set up something which wasn't the best, but it was at least a step better than what they had before. And hopefully we can learn from that and reflect on that for ourselves, inshallah ta'ala. Please recite a salawat ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad. So, as we were saying, Rasulullah is sending out these letters. One of these letters with his ambassador goes to these Christians of Najran. Now, what's inside this letter? Again, generally, I think most of you have probably just heard, it was saying, here's Islam, become Muslim, right? That's pretty much it. And then, I've heard some people say, wasn't this an invitation for them to come to Medina in the first place? So sometimes people have mixed up these details. So I'm going to paraphrase and just give some points here because I can't really go through the full story. We don't have enough time. So at least I'll give some of the lines here. So in the beginning, Rasulullah is saying that I'm inviting you to switch your deen. I want you to switch from the ibadah that you're doing right now. Because right now your ibadah is to the slaves of Allah. I want you to switch your ibadah to the slaves towards the ibadah to Allah Himself. Right? So he's, in a sense, trying to say that, look, you're not completely off. You're doing ibadah, that's great. Just switch where you're doing your ibadah. That's all I'm asking for you. You're doing it to a slave of God right now, but you need to be doing it to God Himself. That's your issue. So he says, I'm inviting you to switch from worshiping slaves to worshiping God. But then here's the part that, well, sometimes it's controversial, but this is the history. We need to sometimes just say history as it is. He says, okay, look, here's the truth. Now, if you refuse, then there's two options here. If you refuse, then you'll have to pay, a little jizya. You have to pay the tax because you'll be under the protection of Muslims and you won't have this duty to come fight in the Muslim army. So you'll have to pay the fact that, you're exempt from army duties, just like many other countries have as well. If you decide not to do that as well, then, I'll put it very simply, he says, then we're going to go to war. So, the reason I'm mentioning this, because sometimes people don't like mentioning these things. Look, when we're talking about spreading the truth and this idea of peace in Islam and all of that stuff, all religions, all ideologies throughout history had pretty much the exact same system. There was one system where they came and said, look, why don't you come and join us? And some people accepted it, some people didn't. When Islam was being spread, generally speaking, most people accepted. Then there were some people who said, look, we want to keep our own deen. We would like to stay Christians or stay Jews. He said, okay, so we will protect you as part of the Muslim state. You can still continue your worship and ibadah, but what you'll do is just pay an amount to be exempt from the rules that Muslims have to follow, meaning you don't have to join the army or anything like that. But if you don't accept any of these things, well, then it's going to be war, because your ideology is problematic then, because you are being adamant and stubborn in your falsehood. And we shouldn't have to shy away from something like this, right? That's not a big deal. I mean, what do other ideologies and countries do? When other countries or other civilizations don't accept certain ways of life, then armies get sent over there, right? And they start saying, respect certain ideas about freedom and all this stuff, and they're told to do this at the barrel of an M16. So this seems to be a normal sort of way that people do things. Our thing is that what's happening over here is that this is haqq and truth that's being spread, and they're being given the chance to come towards truth. Now, when this happens, according to some, this is where the 64th ayah of Surah Al-Imran is revealed. And this was included in the letter as well, where it says, Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim, قُلْ يَا أَهْلَ الْكِتَابِ تَعَالَوْا إِلَى كَلَمَةٍ سَوَاءٍ بَيْنَنَا وَبَيْنَكُمْ. So, saying, okay, Ahlul Kitab, look, we're the same, we're Ahlul Kitab. We've all been addressed to by God. Right? So he's trying to, Allah's, again, including this, telling Rasulullah to include this in the letter. He says, let's understand that we have commonalities between us first. Right? This idea of kalimatin sawa. We have some, there's common stuff between us. Let's focus on that. Bainakum wa bainana. That what? Allah na'buda illallah wa la nushrika bihi shay'a. We should be together in the fact that only Allah needs to be worshipped, and there shouldn't be any shirk. We shouldn't be associating anything else. Meaning he's trying to get them to understand, look, your original Christianity, your original deen did not have all this added stuff in there. You need to go back to the original Christianity as it was being preached by the person that you understand, Nabi Isa alayhi salam. So he's trying to call them back to their original version. وَلَا يَتَّخِذَ بَعْضُنَا بَعْضًا أَرْبَابًا مِنْ دُونِ اللَّهِ. So don't take all these other arbab, these lords, alongside Allah or instead of Allah. فَإِن تَوَلَّوْا. So now Allah's saying, okay, Rasulullah, they might disagree with you. They might say, you know what, you might bring us truth, but we're going to reject it. So Allah is giving Rasulullah the plan B. Like if they don't accept, then this is what happens. فَقُولُوا إِشْهَدُوا بِأَنَّا مُسْلِمُونَ. Well, if these Christians that you're inviting, if they say no, we reject it, then say ishhadu, meaning tell these Christians, you need to bear witness, you need to observe, and don't make any mistake here that we are Muslimun. We are the ones who submit to Allah. Meaning that, look, there are consequences. We are the ones who are bringing God's message, not you. And when that's the case, there are going to be consequences. And what are those consequences? Well, let's continue with the story. If you can recite a salawat ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad. So they get this letter, they're reading it, and they're like, okay, all these Christian priests, these elites are reading it like, okay, what do we do here? So they're thinking, okay, they don't immediately make a decision. They say, look, let's take a delegation of 60 people and let's send them to go have a debate with Rasulullah. Or meaning they're saying Muhammad, obviously, right? Let's go to Medina, let's send our people, and let's go debate him. Because they're thinking, you know what, we're obviously, these Christians are saying, we're on the truth, not him. Let's go, let's take our best, let's take our elites, let's go and debate him, and then we'll bring him to the truth. Because obviously, in a sense, they're being threatened here too. So they're like, you know what, through peaceful words, maybe we can convince them. So let's go debate. So they create this delegation of 60 people to go and discuss and debate. 14 of these 60 were the sort of top elite of the society, meaning like the best of the best Christians. Of those 14, 3 of those were the most well-known Christian priests. Some say in just of Najran, and some say out of all the Christians that were known at that time. And these 3 individuals who were the most respected, so I want to share with you their names. One of them was named Aqib, or Abdul Masih. The other one was named Asqaf, or Usqaf. His name was Abu Haritha ibn Alqama. And the other one was Aham, or Iham, who actually went by Sayyid, not to be confused with another Sayyid that you may know. So this one person Sayyid, one person Aqib, and one person Asqaf. These were the sort of 3 main go-to individuals, right? So pretty much these were the three that did the main talking, the main debating, the main decision making. So now, they enter into Medina. They're going to meet Rasulullah. When they come there, right, they're coming from the border of Yemen. So they come there, they're wearing this fancy embroidered Yemeni silk, right? They're really like looking really good, I guess, in that sense, right? The first thing they do when they come in is they don't go and recognize Rasulullah. They don't go and show him any respect. The first thing they do is they pray in their way, and they pray towards the east, right? So they do it in their own way. So some of the Muslims are ready to they just came into your masjid, they came into our place, and they're doing all their stuff. And, as many of you know, some of these companions were very hot-headed, always ready for a fight. Rasulullah said, look, just leave them be for a second, right? Let them do their thing. It's okay. Leave them alone. Then, so after they did their thing without recognizing Rasulullah, then they started coming towards the Prophet and trying to, say salam and have that initial conversation with him. But at this point, Rasulullah did something interesting that I think maybe some of you do know. He actually didn't welcome them right away. After they did their own Christian prayer, without recognizing Rasulullah, they tried to come afterwards and then, pay their respects. Rasulullah didn't accept it. He didn't welcome them. He didn't let them see them at all. Normally when somebody comes, you say, okay, come into my office or come see me. He refused to see them. So although he let them have their little worship session, he didn't actually entertain them as guests. And he said, you know what? No, you're going to have to come back. So they actually had to come back the next day. And when they came back, then, and there's many maybe different secrets over here that, look, if you want to come and disrespect, well, look, we have our own level of respect too. You can't just come and do your own thing and then expect us to show you that same level of respect, right? Because this is Rasulullah over here. But again, that's a different discussion because it can go on and on for that. So he didn't say anything to them. The next day they had to come back. Then they came and they paid their respects and sent their version of salam, and the Prophet responded. And then he just repeats Rasulullah right away, right? He just says, look, same thing. He's like, I'm inviting you towards Islam. This is the real religion. This is Dinul Haq. That's what you have to follow. And they didn't accept. So this is now when the sort of debate begins. So the first part of this, as the discussion begins, as many of you probably know, and again, I have to kind of skip through this because we're running out of time. This is when they say, look, our story, us Christians, what we're saying is Isa doesn't have a dad. He only has a mom. That's a miracle virgin birth. That's obviously God then. Na'udhu billah. That's the Son of God at least. If you're not going to call him God or the Son of God or the Spirit of God or whatever, then there's something wrong with you because look at how miraculous his birth was, right? So you need to accept that. And this is when, instead of Rasulullah giving his own reply and kind of rationally thinking, how do I respond to them? He waits for the wahi from Allah. And this is where the 59th ayah of Surah Al-Imran comes. And this is the famous verse that many of us know. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Inna mathala Isa inda Allah ka mathali Adam. It's like, hold on a second. So Allah is now responding to them directly. Hold on a second. You want to tell me about my religion? You're giving this simplistic example. Your rationale is that, okay, because Isa didn't have a dad, he's God. Okay, what about Adam? He doesn't have a mom or a dad. So what is that going to make him, right? خَلَقَهُ مِن تُرَابٍ ثُمَّ قَالَ لَهُ كُنْ فَيَكُونَ. He's like, look, this creation is much higher, if you're going to put it that way, than Nabi Isa. How come you're not calling Nabi Adam God then? Or the Son of God or the Spirit of God, whatever. So the direct response to their rationale was given. Now, if they had been reasonable individuals, if they hadn't been stubborn, then this should have been enough. This is a pretty good response. If we're looking at it objectively, this is a very good response. I mean, God pretty much knows how to respond, right? Unfortunately, as we know, they rejected. They said, no, we don't accept. So, now here we go. Rasulullah tried sending a letter. He gave them options. They came for a debate. He still entered, even though they disrespected him, he still entertained them, although he disrespected them a little bit by saying, I'm going to make you wait a day. Then says, okay, fine, I'm giving you one more chance, come to Islam. They say no. They try to argue. He gives them a rational response, direct from God. They say, no, we don't accept. Every single opportunity was given. And now what happens? Allah says, all right, you know what? All other options are off the table. There's only one thing left. And this is where the 61st ayah comes. Same thing, Surah Al-Imran. Is it? Hasan, there we go. فَمَنْ حَاجَّكَ فِيهِ مِنْ بَعْدِ مَا جَاءَكَ مِنَ الْعِلْمِ. So, if now these guys are arguing with you about this knowledge, meaning about Nabi Isa, these guys claim to know Nabi Isa better than you. We've already responded to them. They're claiming that they still know better, even though we've responded to them. Then what? Then فَقُلْ. تعالوا ندعو أبناءنا وأبناءكم ونساءنا ونساءكم وأنفسنا وأنفسكم ثم نبتهل فنجعل لعنة الله على الكاذبين. So Allah says, look, you call your crew, I'm going to call my crew, and we can rendezvous in the deserts of some place around 2. If you get that reference, then I don't know, that might be a problem with you. So he says, look, we've given you all these other opportunities, and you didn't take it. The only other option left is that we're going to wipe you out. That's the only other option left. It's going to be a la'na session now. We tried to be rational with you. We tried to offer peace. You didn't take it. This option's on the table now. This is the last resort where we're going to do Mubahala, which is this mutual praying for Allah's la'na to come on somebody. Which means the word Mubahala or Buhl is meaning that you're being stranded or distanced from something. So they would use this word when a camel has been like distanced or it's stranded somewhere, it's wandered off somewhere. So they would use this word to say that this person has been stranded from God, right? Because the result is that you get the la'na on you, become mal'oon, which means now you are stranded and pulled away and pushed away from the rahmah of Allah. So now both of these groups are agreeing. So Rasulullah is the one who said that, right? Allah tells him, he tells Rasulullah. So this is not from the Christians, this is Rasulullah, right? This prophet of mercy. After all the mercy, you try it, well, okay, then the mercy is going to have to be removed. If you can't handle the mercy, then la'na is that's what happens sometimes. So this is the invitation. But one of these individuals who was very smart, I think Asqaf was the one, who was the smartest of all these elites, said, you know what? They were a little confused. They said, we've never been challenged like this before. Nobody's ever challenged us to Mubahala. They knew the concept because this existed among the previous prophets. They knew about this. They said, you know what? We need some time to think about it. So they delegated and they figured out and they said, we're not sure. So Asqaf said, look, let's not agree right away. Let's say, let's tell Muhammad that we'll meet him tomorrow. But here's the thing. So again, this is their, private conversation between all the Christians. If he just comes with his ashab, his sahaba, his companions and his friends and his soldiers and people like that, just general people, or he brings like his army, then we'll know that he's full of nonsense. Na'udhu billah. But if he comes with his family, if he brings children with him, then we'll know that then there's going to be something different here, and then we have to make sure that we don't engage in Mubahala then. And then of course, I think all of you know the story because time is up, so you know what happens there. Of course, they agree, they meet the next day. Rasulullah does not come with any of the ashab. There is no disagreement between Sunnis and Shias. There are no sahaba there. It's only Rasulullah, and his godi in his hand is a baby Imam Hussein. In his one hand, Imam Hasan, who are 3, 4, 5 years old at most. Imam Ali, who's in his 30s maybe. Baby Fatima, who's maybe 18 years old. Just these 5 individuals who come down this mountain, this hill, in this valley. And when these Christians see that, immediately they say, look, if we even begin to start Mubahala, if they utter one single word and turn towards Allah, all of Christianity will be wiped out. We need to tell them to stop right away, and we have to, jump out of this. And this is all because of what they saw, because they understood what was happening. And there was another point too. They saw that when Rasulullah was about to begin, they saw that he actually fell to his knees. He went down to his knees to begin the Mubahala. Rasulullah did. And Asqaf, the one who knew, who is that top elite Christian priest, he said, you know what? The only way he knows how to do this is because this is the same seed of all the previous prophets. When they engaged in Mubahala, that's how they did it. They went down on his knees and they performed these certain actions. This means he must be a prophet. So he's like, you know what? No. Stop. Don't say anything else. Well, we're done. We're not going to do any Mubahala. Let us go back. We'll pay the jizya. Don't worry. So they agreed. And then between him and Rasulullah, they made an agreement that we're going to pay a certain amount of jizya. And there is, certain other agreements that if the Muslim army needs to come to Yemen, they would supply them with, I think, 300 shields, 300 horses or something like that. And then Rasulullah said, after you do that, we will pay you back for that. But every year you have to send a certain amount of dirhams. I think it was like the equivalent of like 400,000 dirhams, whatever that was. So, look, you don't want to accept the sum, no problem, but you got to pay, right? Sometimes, oh, I was going to make a joke there. I won't make the joke. But they decided, no. When they come back, they go back to Najran. A few of them had decided, you know what? This has to be the deen of truth, and they end up becoming Muslim. So some continued and end up just paying the jizya, and some of them, especially people like Asqaf and I think Abu Haritha, who else? Asqaf and maybe one of the other ones. They decided to become Muslims because of what they had witnessed, because of simply viewing the personalities of the Ahlul Bayt. That was enough for them to become followers of the Ahlul Bayt. That was it. Right? So this is, there's a lot of points to take from this story. One thing that we mentioned in the beginning was the fact that all this is happening at the end of Rasulullah's life. Right? So we talked about, sometimes we need to really rethink our model of outreach and interfaith and things like that, that Rasulullah is doing this at the end, not at the beginning. So we need to really think, are we doing enough for our own community before we start talking to others and reaching out? The other thing we have to think about as well is in the same way that Najran, although it was majority Christian, it was still established and set up by somebody who had good intentions. He was still a good slave of Allah. And maybe our own communities, maybe they weren't set up with the best ideal Islamic principles, but they're a good foundation and we can build off of them. And rather than just simply complaining all the time, we have to put in the effort, offer criticism, offer our constructive criticism and feedback, volunteer, and put our own effort forward. Right? Don't just talk, do something about it. And then finally, this last point as well is that, yes, it's a religion of mercy. We try dialogue, we try peace, and all of this. But at the end of the day, sometimes, right, you have to take extreme measures. Sometimes that la'na is the only measure that's left. Now, this is not an encouragement for anybody. If you disagree with somebody, right, you argue about something, then you challenge them to Mubahala. I don't. I've heard people do this sometimes in certain communities where they disagree about something, and they're like, I challenge you to Mubahala. Like, that's not how it works, right? Don't just start challenging people to Mubahala. That's not the way it works. There's a lot more to the story, but again, we tried to go through as many of the details as possible here. I wanted to go through the history of Najran as well. We gave some of it, but we weren't able to complete it all. We'll end, inshallah, with one more unrelated question, inshallah, after a salawat ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad. The element involved in making human blood red is which of the following? Cobalt, iron, iridium, or copper? And as usual, I thought I wasn't going to have enough material tonight. And there's always more. There's always too much to go through. %79% of you are correct. It's iron. Okay, let's see who is the winner for tonight. If it's the person who spelled Mubahala incorrectly, then I'll be very surprised. Okay. Well, at least the one who spelled it correctly made it third. So good. A banana. I don't know if you're trying to say a banana. I think you were trying to say a banana, but you got very close. So, and you got 4 out of 4. Well, most of you got 4 out of 4. So great job. And 33 seconds. And 33 is a very special number, so great job there. Abu with 3 U's, 43 seconds, so very close. Mubahala spelled correctly, 53 seconds. Oh, everybody 10 seconds apart. Nice job. Both DOGs, one that's without the Ghulam Husseins and one that's with the Ghulam Husseins. Also, 4 out of 4, great job to you, but just a little slow on the trigger. Inshallah, you can do better next time. Okay, inshallah, we will see you all on Thursday night. And I apologize, we went a little bit over time today. And if anybody has a problem with me, you can challenge me to Mubahala if you want. Walhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. Wa sallallahu ala Sayyidina Muhammad wa ala Ahl Bayt at-Tayyibin at-Tahirin. Salawat ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad.
Sayyid Hasan Rizvi, brothers and sisters in Islam, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. During the holy month of Ramadan, IEC Academy had the honor of participating in the Nisimco Iqra Quran competition, where several of the students from IEC Academy participated and received recognition as top performers. So tonight, in the honor of the special day of Eid-e-Mubahela, or the special night, we'd like to honor them with a small token of appreciation. At this time, I'd like to request Sayyid Hasan Rizvi to set aside here on the left here as we present for the boys. And in the ladies' side, if we can request Sister Tazim Baijesa to present to the ladies, inshallah. So we request both the gents and the ladies, as each name is recited, to recite a salawat. So the first student to get a recognition from the competition was Sister Sabiha Mauji. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. The second is Sister Junaina Zahra Bangash. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. The third one is Brother Hasan Raza. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad. Some may not be here today, but if your name is called and you're here, please come to the front. Next is Brother Muhammad Ashad. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. Next is Sister Alia Fatima Lalji. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. Next is Brother Abbas Yusuf Ali. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. Okay. We know Abbas is here somewhere, but it's okay. No worries. Next is Sister Zainab Dawdali. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. Next is Sister Zamina Dewji. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. Next is Brother Fayaz Lalji. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. Next is Brother Hasan Parpia. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. Next is Brother Zain Ali Ramtullah. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. Next is Sakina Dawdali. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. Next is Sister Zahra Karmali. Salli ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. Next is Sister Zainab Zahra Hirji. Next is Sister Zainab Dewji. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. Next is Sister Zia Fatima Yusuf Ali. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. Next is Sister Zobia Ibrahim. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. Next is brother Hussein Abbas Jafar. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. Next is brother Jabir Dala. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. Ajal faraj. Next is brother Muhammad Abbas Ali. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. Next is sister Amina Lalji. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. Next is brother Hadi Yusuf Ali. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. Next is brother Hani Muhammad Lalji. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. Next is brother Muhammad Kamal Somji. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. And the last student is sister Kamila Karmali. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. During the competition, we also had an honor to have one of our beloved members of the community represent IEC Academy as a judge for the competition. So we'd like to call Brother Ali Najaf Ali to come and receive his gift. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. And also we had one of our sisters from the community, Sister Tanveer Pir Muhammad, was one of the organizers of the Nisimco Ikra competition. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. I'd like to thank all the students for their diligent practice and making the community proud with their participation in the competition, and encourage all our students and children in the community to continue to learn the divine scripture and as we continue our lives. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
محمد وآل محمد salawat. बदरो ओहद से यूं भी है बाला मुबाहला बदरो बदरो ओहद से यूं भी है बाला मुबाहला के करने चली है फातिमा ज़हरा मुबाहला करने चली है फातिमा ज़हरा मुबाहला इस्लाम हार जाता सदाकत की जंग में इस्लाम हार जाता सदाकत की जंग में मिलकर भी कुल मदीना जो کرتا مباہلا مل کر بھی کل مدینہ جو کرتا مباہلا وہ تو نساءنا کے سبب آ گئی بطول وہ تو نساءنا کے سبب آ گئی بطول ورنہ تو جیت سکتی تھی فضا مباہلا ورنہ تو جیت سکتی تھی فضا مباہلا محمد وآل محمد صلوات سردر آل محمد پر جھکانا چاہیے سردر آل محمد پر جھکانا چاہیے اپنی نسلوں کو وفا اپنی نسلوں کو وفاداری سکھانا چاہیے سردر آل محمد پر جھکانا چاہیے اے خدا جنت کسی محتاج کو کر دے عطا اے خدا جنت کسی محتاج کو کر دے عطا ہم کو جنت کی جگہ ہم کو جنت کی جگہ عاشور خانہ چاہیے سردر آل محمد پر جھکانا چاہیے آدمی کو صاحب ایمان ہونے کے لیے آدمی کو صاحب ایمان ہونے کے لیے دوم سے جشن ابو طالب منانا چاہیے سردر آل محمد پر جھکانا چاہیے باپ کی جاگیر پر بیٹے کا حق ہے اس لیے باپ کی جاگیر پر بیٹے کا حق ہے اس لیے ایک علم کعبے کی چھت پر بھی لگانا چاہیے سردر آل محمد پر جھکانا چاہیے سردر آل محمد پر جھکانا چاہیے محمد وآل محمد صلوات
بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم السلام عليك يا رسول الله السلام عليك يا نبي الله السلام عليك يا أمير المؤمنين علي بن أبي طالب السلام عليك يا فاطمة الزهراء سيدة نساء العالمين السلام عليك يا خديجة الغراء السلام عليك يا أبا محمد الحسن. السلام عليك يا أبا عبد الله الحسين، وعلى 9 المعصومين من ذريتك وبنيك، علي السجاد ومحمد الباقر وجعفر الصادق وموسى الكاظم وعلي الرضا ومحمد التقي الجواد وعلي النقي والحسن العسكري والحجة ابن الحسن. السلام عليك يا مولانا يا صاحب العصر والزمان وخليفة الرحمن وشريك القرآن وكعبة الإيمان وإمامنا وإمام الإنس والجان. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته.